All right. Well, good afternoon, everyone. Joining us today in the briefing room is Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Russia, Ukraine, and Eurasia, Laura Cooper, who will provide some remarks about today's announcement regarding the approval of the 29th Presidential Drawdown Authorization in support of Ukraine's security assistance. And afterwards, we'll be available to answer any questions that you have. Thank you, Secretary Cooper. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I am proud to be here today to discuss the Biden administration's commitment of over $3 billion in security assistance for Ukraine. As President Biden said yesterday, the war in Ukraine is at a critical point right now, and we have to do everything we can to help the Ukrainians continue to resist Russian aggression. Today's announcement, the largest security assistance package in total value that we have committed so far, reflects our enduring commitment to support Ukraine. This package includes the authorization of presidential drawdown of equipment from U.S. inventories valued at up to $2.85 billion. And it includes an additional $225 million in foreign military financing to contribute to the long-term capacity and modernization of Ukraine's military. So let me highlight some of the capabilities included in this package. First, as President Biden announced yesterday, we are committing 50 Bradley infantry fighting vehicles with 500 TOW anti-tank missiles and 250,000 rounds of 25-millimeter ammunition. The Bradley vehicles will further enhance Ukraine's ability to conduct complex maneuvers in almost all weather conditions and terrain, especially in the south and the east of the country. The Bradley is a tracked armored vehicle that is agile, provides mounted firepower, and is a significant anti-armor capability. This complements a series of armor commitments by the United States and our allies. These include a French commitment of AMX-10 light tanks, a German commitment of Marder infantry fighting vehicles, both announced this week, as well as a recent joint U.S.-Netherlands commitment to provide upgraded T-72 tanks. This package also includes 100 M113 armored personnel carriers, 55 mine-resistant ambush-protected vehicles, or MRAPs, and another 138 Humvees. These additional M113s, beyond the 200 we have already committed, will further enhance Ukraine's fleet of tracked armored vehicles to support operations in the east and south. We have now committed more than 1,300 Humvees to enable Ukraine to protect and transport their forces during maneuver operations. The MRAPs will improve Ukraine's ability to maneuver, including through heavily mined terrain. In addition, the package includes significant artillery commitments. These include 18 self-propelled 155-millimeter howitzers, known as the Paladin system, and an additional 155 millimeter artillery rounds. This is the first U.S. commitment of these self-propelled howitzers, which will provide greater protection and maneuverability than the towed howitzers previously provided, and will complement self-propelled howitzers already provided by allies. We are also providing an additional 36 105-millimeter towed howitzers to strengthen Ukraine's layered approach to fires, as well as 105-millimeter rounds. These capabilities will complement and work with the expanded U.S.-led training beginning this month that will build Ukraine's capacity to conduct joint maneuver and combined operations. We will ensure Ukraine has both the equipment and the skilled forces necessary to sustain its efforts to push back on Russian aggression. We are also committing 4,000 Zuni aircraft rockets, which can be mounted on Ukraine's existing aircraft to engage air or ground targets. In the category of air defense, which is still a top priority for Ukraine, given Russia's ongoing missile attacks, we are committing RIM-7 missiles. These can be integrated into Ukraine's Soviet-era tactical surface-to-air missile systems, and this provides the Ukrainians with additional capabilities to defend against Russian aerial attacks. We will continue to support Ukraine's urgent requirement for air defense capabilities to defend against Russia's brutal attacks, which, as you noticed, continued throughout the holiday season. We commend Germany for its important commitment this week to also supply a Patriot air defense battery to Ukraine. This will supplement the U.S. donation of a Patriot battery announced in December. On the ground in Ukraine, we continue to see intense fighting during this winter, especially in the east around Crimea and Bakhmut. Ukrainian forces are showing an undiminished will to fight to defend their country. Ukraine will continue fighting through the winter with the backing of a large coalition of nations, and we continue to encourage allies and partners to make additional donations to bolster Ukraine's combat and air defense capabilities. The United States has now committed more than $24.2 billion in security assistance since Russia's full-scale invasion last February, and we will continue to support Ukraine for as long as it takes. Thank you, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you very much, ma'am. We'll start with Associated Press, Lita Baldor.
Hi, thanks a lot. I guess a question on the Bradleys. A lot of critics would say that it's taken too long for the U.S. and the West to send the Bradleys, and complain that the U.S. has not sent tanks yet. Can you address that and the reluctance to send sort of an Abrams tank? And then just a quick thing, when do you expect the training on the Bradleys to begin? Where will that take place? And when do you expect them to arrive? Even though you don't want to give a specific date, generally, when do you expect them to arrive?
Sure. Thanks, Lita. So in general, I want to emphasize again that we are always looking at what Ukraine needs and providing them what they need when they need it. And their battlefield needs have evolved over time. One of the considerations that we look at is certainly the capability that an item of equipment would offer. But we also have to look at things like maintenance and training, sustainment, and cost plays a factor certainly at times. In the case of the Bradley, what you are seeing is a recognition that this is the right time for us to provide this armored capability. This is the right time for Ukraine to take advantage of its capabilities to change the dynamic on the battlefield. And from a maintenance and sustainment standpoint, and this is really important, the Ukrainians have demonstrated a lot of growing proficiency in maintenance and sustainment, both within Ukraine and relying on new systems that we have set up with our allies and partners to provide what we call telemaintenance in many instances. So at this point, the Ukrainians really are set up for success once we are able to train them on this system. And I think it's important to note that this also comes at the auspicious time that we are expanding our training program. Many of you have heard about our launch that will happen later this month of new combined arms training. So we will be able to enable the Ukrainians to take advantage of this capability. And again, not just actually to employ it on the battlefield, but to maintain and sustain it. And in terms of your question about the timing, it'll take a couple of months, basically, to get this capability fielded, to get the Ukrainians trained. That new training program that we're starting, it's roughly a battalion's worth of forces at a time, so roughly 500 soldiers over the course of roughly a month. And we're adding on on the Bradley training. But the tank capability that you reference, this is something that we absolutely agree that Ukraine does need tanks. It's one of the reasons that we partnered with the Netherlands to refurbish a number of T-72 tanks that are already arriving on the battlefield. But we have to be cognizant of maintenance and sustainment considerations with tanks. And certainly we know that the Abrams tank, in addition to being a gas guzzler, is quite challenging to maintain. So we want to look across the board at the range of tank capabilities and see where we can all support Ukraine. But again, we're already doing that with the T-72 tanks, and now we see France also with their light tanks.
Thank you very much, ma'am. Let's go to Bill.
There's a lot of talk about a potential new Russian offensive. I'm wondering, do you think that's possible if, without a second mobilization? What would it take for Russia to stage another major offensive? And also, what do you read into the offer, the ceasefire offer from Putin? Do you think that was just a ploy? Do you think the Russian forces are looking to reset and try to buy time?
Thanks. I'll take the second part first, Phil. So in terms of the statement by Putin about the ceasefire, I can tell you we see fighting today in Ukraine, even though technically we're in the ceasefire window. So even if you thought that this was just a propaganda ploy, on the ground it's not playing out. And in terms of this notion of arrest and refit, certainly we do assess that Russian forces are in dire need of rest and refit. But the short span of time for this ceasefire is not consistent with that. So once again, it's a statement from Putin that we have to take with a grain of salt. This is the same man who said he would not invade Ukraine. So in terms of your broader question, though, about what we can expect to see on the battlefield in the kind of near to midterm, I think you will see Russian forces, trying to advance, trying to mobilize what they can. In the case of what we've seen in Bakhmut with Wagner's forces, in many cases it's conscripted, convicts on the battlefield. So I think you'll still see Russia trying to employ this tactic of just sending wave upon wave of forces to try to gain what end up being very marginal territorial gains, whether you're talking, meters or miles. It really isn't substantial. And I think we'll still see more of that. But I think you will also see this dynamic of the Ukrainians as we are training them, as they are, making use of this new equipment by the U.S. and the allies. We will see the Ukrainians also able to move forward and to change this dynamic on the battlefield. And that's what we're focused on.
But just to follow up, a second mobilization, would that be militarily necessary for Russia to make more than very incremental gains? And also, do you believe that the Russians still have the desire to retake, big swaths of Ukraine?
I assess that that Putin has not given up his aims of dominating Ukraine and continuing to acquire Ukraine's territory. So I do not think his aims have changed. But the reality of Russian weaknesses, the Russian armed forces' weaknesses, has collided with those aims. And one of the weak points that you mentioned is the human capital element. And so it is clear that to be able to advance, the Russian forces do need to be of better quality, better training, and morale is a factor too, and that's one that Russia has been unable to affect.
And if I can just add on to that, to Dasdy Cooper's point, just adding more people is not going to address some of the systemic issues that the Russian military has faced throughout this campaign. In fact, it makes it more difficult to conduct operations. And so while in places like Bakhmut, where you see Russia conducting offensive operations and making some of those incremental gains, largely along that front line, they have dug in to defend the lines and defend the territory that they had taken. And so as you look at the U.S. and the international response by providing the equipment and, importantly now, the training that we're providing, it does afford Ukraine an opportunity to change the equation on the battlefield and gain momentum and defend, not only defend their territory, but hopefully take back territory. And so this is part of that ongoing effort to support them in that larger campaign. Okay, let's go to Jen.
What impact is the lack of a Speaker of the House and a lack of actually a House of Representatives right now having on your ability to supply Ukraine with weapons or carry out the work in Ukraine?
I'm still pushing forward, providing the Ukrainians what they need when they need it.
So no impact?
My day-to-day is not affected right now.
Thank you. Let's go to Patrick Tucker at Defense One.
Hi, thanks for doing this. I wonder if you could speak really briefly to how you plan to backfill the Bradleys. Are there going to be new contracts for new Bradleys, or how are you going to address the backfill needs given today's announcement?
Thank you. So with the Bradleys, it's the same as with all of our capabilities that we are providing to Ukraine. Congress has granted us replenishment funds so that we can actually go out and purchase capabilities to backfill what we have provided in cases where it's an ongoing need. Now, I don't have the specific, contracting details to offer, but that is the case with each of these areas of capability.
Thanks. Let's go to Nick.
Thanks, Laura, for doing this. Pat Ryder just used the term take back territory. You used the term to change the dynamic on the battlefield. Can you speak specifically to what you hope Ukraine can do and or achieve with this particular group of weapons? And I know it's a bit of beating a dead horse, but to lead us question, going back to the tanks, you said that there's maintenance and sustainment considerations. With the Abrams, the Ukrainians would say, with all due respect, you had those concerns with other weapons, and we have proven we can sustain and maintain anything that you give us. So can you respond again to the Ukrainian desire for tanks, but also saying that, hey, we can overcome any challenges that you may see?
Okay, so on the tank issue, it's about the right capability in multiple facets, and maintenance and sustainment is one of them, and it's an important one, especially when there's alternate capabilities that might offer easier maintenance or sustainment. But I stand by that earlier statement that what we are looking at is providing them what they need when they need it, and the Bradley is a capability that we could envision them really using to great effect along with the training. It's not a capability without the training. It's just a piece of equipment otherwise. So we're providing, the equipment, the training, the ability to maintain and sustain, both through training, but also through actually ensuring they have the right, the right parts and that they have the right know-how and access to the right know-how. This is a capability that, combined with this training, will enable them to change this. When I say change this dynamic, it's this dynamic that you see right now where it's, inches forward, whether it's the Russians in Bakhmut or, even the Ukrainians trying to kind of inch forward. We believe that through the combined arms training, they will better be able to integrate all of their different capabilities. That includes artillery, all types of fires, as well as maneuver to be able to make greater progress on the battlefield and really push back on these Russian positions. So that's what we're looking forward to seeing in the coming months.
Right, but just to elucidate that, you just said it's inches forward now, or what are you saying? General Ryder just said, take back territory. Is there a specific territory? Is there a specific achievement that you believe this package of weapons can enable the Ukrainians to achieve?
We take our lead from the Ukrainian objectives. So the Ukrainians have, their plans, their vision of where they want to press forward on the battlefield. We certainly, give them advice and, as I said, give them equipment and training to be able to meet their objectives. But I'm not going to speak for what Ukraine's specific near-term territorial objectives are.
Thanks very much. Tony?
A couple of questions. Hi. Is it fair to say that the U.S. is basically positioning Ukraine to conduct massive armor formation attacks on the Russians?
We are positioning Ukraine to be able to move forward and retake territory, and be able to, defend themselves against this persistent onslaught of Russian missile attack.
To what extent are you having to cobble together a command and control system so that French vehicles and German vehicles and U.S. vehicles can talk to each other? in layman's language?
Well, certainly there are different vehicles, but I mean, look at the battlefield in Ukraine today. We see so many different types of equipment from so many different countries. We see Soviet-type equipment and, modern NATO interoperable equipment. So I think the Ukrainians are expert at, using different types of equipment and still being able to operate as a coherent force. And in terms of specifically on communications, over the years, we've provided thousands of individual secure communications sets to the Ukrainians, so we know that they can take advantage of those to be able to communicate and operate in a mobile fashion.
One quick weapons, air question. JDAM kits are supposed to be going over there, these Joint Direct Attack Munitions kits. When will the Ukrainian Air Force be hot-wired, or the avionics of their airplanes be adjusted so they can actually drop these weapons? Are we talking the next month or two, or is that a longer-term process?
So, Tony, when it comes to some new capabilities, we like to give the Ukrainians a chance to actually operate these capabilities and field them before we talk about the specifics, so I'm not going to give specific timelines.
Fair enough.
Okay, let's go to Fadi, and then we'll go back up to the phones.
Thank you, John. Thank you, Deputy. So I want to focus maybe on the bigger picture in light of this biggest package of assistance and the hope that you both expressed that this training and the new equipment will aid the Ukrainians in retaking more territory. Is the assessment in the department and the administration writ large that there's no political solution for this war, and the only way to end it is by basically a victory by Ukraine to change Putin's calculus?
We've said before, and I'll reiterate it, that our focus is on giving the Ukrainians the strongest possible position at the negotiating table when they choose to move forward with negotiations, and they are in the driver's seat with that.
Does the U.S., with all these commitments and billions of dollars from taxpayers, have any say in these negotiations, whether to create incentives for Ukraine when the time is right, or it's ultimately only Ukraine's decision?
Again, Ukraine is in the driver's seat with negotiations, and we are here as their supportive partner.
And Fadi, to your point, I mean, this, at least from a U.S. government standpoint, this is an interagency process, right, which includes bipartisan support from Congress, the elected representatives of the people on that note. But again, if you step back and you look at the consequences of not supporting a country like Ukraine that was illegally invaded, what precedent does that set, and how expensive would it be to have to address the kind of world we would live in should we not support Ukraine in countries like that? So, all right, let's go ahead and go out to the phones here.
Just a quick follow-up. I mean, these are two different things. Supporting Ukraine to defend itself is there is wide-based support for it in the Congress, but this is different from supporting as well political negotiations to end war. I mean, they can go hand in hand, and there's no contradiction. So my question was very precise to the fact that the U.S. is being the biggest beneficiary for Ukraine. Does the American people or the administration have any say, or even creating incentives for Ukraine to, when the time is right, to engage in negotiations? Because it seems like no one is talking about any end for this war so far.
Sorry, go ahead, ma'am.
No, I mean, I think we answered the question in terms of certainly the U.S. has a huge stake in this, and certainly the Ukrainians are listening to us all the time as close partners. But when it comes to making these decisions about the specifics of the negotiations, the Ukrainians have to take the lead there.
Yeah. Okay, let's go out to the phone here. Jeff Shogel, Task and Purpose.
Thank you. I noticed there isn't a number for the RIM missiles. I was wondering if you could give us, if not a number, then a range. And also, foreign policy is reporting that the Kremlin is concerned that a foreign government could launch a psychic attack on Kremlin officials. Does the U.S. government have any weapons or personnel who can get into the enemy's thoughts?
Psychic.
What was
psychic attack?
On the missile, you'll notice that when we provide air defense missile capabilities, we do not give numbers. That is for operational security reasons, and we will maintain that tradition with this package. And I have nothing on your second topic.
Thanks, Jeff. Let's go to Matt Seiler, ABC.
Hi, thank you. Ms. Cooper, you told one of my colleagues earlier that the lack of a House Speaker doesn't concern you at the moment. I had a related question. Bloomberg reported today that Kevin McCarthy is in discussions over a deal to help secure support for that role among Republicans that could include a $75 billion cut to defense spending. I just wanted to ask you if that's something, the prospect of such a cut is concerning, and how that might affect your ability to support Ukraine.
Well, thanks. I could tell you that we have enjoyed tremendous bipartisan support for Ukraine security assistance. And, while I certainly would imagine that the details of that assistance will evolve over time, I still would anticipate, strong support from the U.S. Congress. And we will continue to partner with the Congress and ensure that we are working with them to address our national security needs, to include by protecting Ukraine's sovereignty.
Let's come back here, Mike.
Yeah, could you assess the relationship on the battlefield between the Wagner Group and the Russian mainline military? Are they working together? Are they working at cross purposes? Are they fighting each other rather than fighting Ukraine? I mean, there seems to be two military forces. It violates, unity of command and, bunches of other principles of war. I was wondering, how does the Pentagon assess the relationship between them?
Well, I can say it certainly isn't, a traditional unit relationship like you would see with other units of the Russian military. But at the same time, Wagner is not this completely independent entity. It is certainly operating as part of an overall Russian military invasion of Ukraine with the support, cognizance, and leadership of Russian leaders, Kremlin leadership, and military leaders. And, it is drawing on resources of the Russian state in a very novel way, to include by drawing on, convicts and, sending them into battle, killing, hundreds and hundreds of these individuals in the process. So it is a symbiotic relationship and at times a coordinated relationship.
Courtney.
I want to ask one more time about on this package, because I was struck when, I think it was Lita's question at the very beginning when you, Ms. Cooper, when you said that this is the right time for the Bradleys. And I'm still just not clear. I mean, the thing that really stands out to me about this package is there's a lot of vehicles that are just basically people movers. I know the Bradleys have the tows, but they also, unlike a tank, can move people around. And then you have 200 vehicles for moving people. So why is it the right time? What is the capability, or what are you looking at that the Ukrainians are planning to do on the battlefield that they need to be moving people around?
Okay, so again, when I talk about, changing that dynamic on the battlefield and enabling the Ukrainian armed forces with additional capability, it is so that they can not just, apply artillery to a given position, but can also integrate with maneuver and actually be able to regain territory. And the Bradley specifically has formidable anti-armor capabilities that will work against, every kind of armored capability that Russia has fielded in Ukraine. But the Ukrainians need more than that. And that's why, you see us surging other types of mobility capabilities, not just the United States again, but also allies.
Okay. Oren, and then we'll go to Wafa.
Two different questions. First, on the RIM 7s, what platform will the Ukrainians use to launch them? Have you adapted them to work with S-300s or something like that? And how long did that take? Because that's not something you just do overnight. And then the second question, completely different. I was wondering if you could give an overview of what changes you've seen on the battlefield now that Russia's new theater commander has been in for I think, a couple months at this point, General Surovikin.
Okay, so on the first one, the RIM 7 will integrate with the Buk system. So this is a Soviet-type system, but the S-300 you mentioned, that's strategic range, whereas the Buk is a shorter range system. It is a creative solution that did require some engineering finesse, but we're very pleased that it will work for the Ukrainians. In terms of changes since Surovikin took command, there's been a lot of dynamics on the battlefield, and it might be hard to attribute them to Surovikin himself. But I would say that one of the more notable developments, of course, before the holidays was the return of Kherson to Ukrainian control, and that withdrawal of Russian forces that occurred. And more recently, it's that surge with in Bakhmut of Wagner forces. So in the recent past, we've seen that Wagner is advancing at a more rapid clip than any other unit in the Russian military.
Time for a few more, Wafa? No. Okay.
Thank you, ma'am, for doing this. So obviously the price tag of this security is getting bigger with each package, and also the debate here in Washington about how until when this assistance will continue is growing also. If you can talk a little bit more about the strategic gain the United States is obtaining from this war, and if it's worth the cost.
Thank you. I would say that, from an overall strategic perspective, it is hard to emphasize enough the devastating consequences if Putin were to be successful in achieving his objective of taking over Ukraine. This would rewrite international boundaries in a way that we have not seen since World War II. And our ability to reverse these gains and to support and stand by the sovereignty of a nation, it's something that resonates not just in Europe, but all around the world, because no one wants to send a signal to another bully around the world that they can take over their neighboring country without paying a steep, steep price.
Okay, let's go to Mike.
The Sea Sparrows, you put them on the Buks. That's a proliferated system. That's a ground-to-air capability now. Is that going to have a severe impact on Russian drones, cruise missiles, or is it going to be a little bit of trimming around the edges? That's the first one. And then the second is, should we think of these 50 Bradleys as the first tranche?
Okay, so on this question of the Buk system, with air defense, you can never consider one system in isolation. It's all about the layered air defense with multiple systems with different ranges applied over broad geographic territory, protecting key nodes. So, Buk is an important system at the for short range, and the Ukrainians, I'm sure, will be masterful at employing this new missile on this system that they are very familiar with. But it's only in concert with these other capabilities that the Ukrainians can continue to successfully shoot down this withering attack of, by cruise missiles and, Iranian-purchased drones and other threats from the air. And I forget the other question.
50 Bradleys is at the start.
Oh, we're always looking at what comes next. So I'm not going to say that this is the end, but I'm also not going to say that it's the start. I'd go back to the Allied piece, and to preview for you, we do have later this month another one of our Ukraine Defense Contact Group meetings where Secretary Austin gathers 50 defense ministers, and they consult with the Ukrainian leadership, with Minister of Defense Reznikov and his team about Ukraine's needs. Well, the fact that we're already seeing these very major contributions being announced by Germany, the Patriot and the Martyr, by the French and others, we would certainly expect to continue to see additional announcements either in the lead up or as in conjunction with the Ukraine Defense Contact Group. So again, I wouldn't just look at the United States for these capabilities, but look at the broader picture.
On allies, there's 11 countries that have 11 countries have Sea Sparrows. Do you expect some other countries to start donating from their magazines as well?
I don't have any specific information on that particular capability, although I do have a very long list of capabilities that allies have, but off the top of my head, I'm not sure.
All right, let's go to Howard Altman, and we'll do the last two questions here in the room.
Thanks, appreciate it. Can you tell me which version of the Bradley that Ukraine will be getting, and then talk about provisions for spare parts for that? Thanks.
I think I just heard with the version of the Bradley, it's the M2A2 Bradley. And I think you said spare parts, and yes, we are providing spare parts again, and support for maintenance.
Okay. Sir.
On the Zuni rockets, can you detail that capability a little bit more? And along with the recent JDAM provision, there seems to be a shift to provide Ukraine with some air strike capabilities. So why was that decision made now to give these rockets and these guided munitions, and what can they do with the Zuni rockets?
So in terms of providing Ukraine with capability for their aircraft, it's actually something we've been working on for a while. Several months ago, we provided them with HARM missiles, and they've been using them really to great effect from their MiGs. So this is really just the latest in efforts to help them to make their existing aircraft fleet as effective as possible. And the Zuni aircraft rockets, we're providing 4,000 of them, and they can be mounted on fixed or rotary wing aircraft. And again, it's air to ground, but it's at fairly close range. These are not long range capabilities.
How hard is that a modification to make to mount these?
Again, I think I trust our engineers, and I definitely trust the Ukrainian engineers. So they have done this successfully, and it is something that is possible.
Okay, Kasim, and then final question.
One, you said even though there's technically we are in the ceasefire window, the fighting continues. Can you confirm that Russians have violated Putin's unilateral declaration of ceasefire? That's one question. I have another separate question.
Well, I can confirm that there is fighting, and of course, it's Russians on the ground fighting. So yes.
And the other question about Patriots. Could you update us, please, on the Patriots? When the training is going to start, and when will we see the Patriots being fielded in Ukraine?
Yes, so we will start training for Patriot later this month, but I'm not going to be able to give you a specific time frame for the completion of training. It will take several months. So again, Patriot is not an immediate term capability, but we will start that training very soon.
Okay, final question.
Thank you so much. A quick follow-up. When you started, you mentioned telemaintenance of these new systems being sent over. Can you elaborate a little bit on that and the digital capabilities that go with that? And then separately, broadly, thinking about the hundreds of millions in foreign military financing, what types of systems are you guys anticipating allies to be using that funding on?
Thank you. So the FMF that I mentioned is just the FMF for Ukraine. So for Ukraine, we haven't specified exactly what capabilities will be purchased via this particular FMF tranche, but FMF is a longer-term funding source. So it will not be these kind of immediate battlefield needs that we're tending to with a drawdown package that we're discussing today.
Can you elaborate on the types of systems maybe that you're anticipating?
Well, I'll just reiterate kind of what are the top priorities for Ukraine, and the top priority capability needs for Ukraine, and certainly this will evolve over time, but probably not for a while. Air defense is a top priority, so we'll still be looking at air defense investments, and so will the allies. Artillery, artillery and long-range fires. This is where our HIMARS system has been so so fantastic, but there's a number of ways that allies and the U.S. have supported Ukraine with artillery needs. And then today I talked a lot about armor, which is that third piece. There are other capability needs, but those are the top three. And on telemakes, I think I can't get into kind of the technical detail of exactly which systems we're using, but it's exactly what it sounds like, where, Ukrainian operators, wherever they are in Ukraine, if they need assistance with repair work, they don't necessarily have to take the equipment out and get, a Western manufacturer to help them. They can actually just dial up this capability and get advice and have, experienced personnel walk them through the steps so that they can get it right back into the battlefield.
Thank you very much, everybody. Have a great weekend.
Okay. Thank you.